Let me start with what I'll consider a provocative question today. And that's, what's the one thing that you think your bank doesn't want you to know about your debit card? Imagine this, waking up one morning to find that your bank account is completely drained. I'm going to tell a story today that happened to one of my clients, and why it happened is just might surprise you. So today we're going to dive deep into the world of debit cards. We're going to talk about credit cards, and we're going to talk about some financial choices that can make or break your security. Well, stay tuned to find out how this hidden secret could be costing you thousands. Well, let's get started by talking about yesterday's show. On yesterday's show, we talked about taming your tongue. I think it was a great discussion about how to really bring the words you use, the things you say into alignment. As always, you can find all of our past episodes at askralph.com. And guess what? We are closing in on over 500 episodes. Let's get into today's topic. I received a message from Stephanie. She comes to us from Chicago and she writes this: Dear Ralph, I've always used my debit card for everything, thinking it was the responsible way to manage my money. I was always told that if I didn't have the money, I should not buy it. But recently a friend told me I should be using a credit card instead. He said I could lose all of my money, and besides that, I could be earning a huge amount in credit card rewards. I'm confused and worried. Am I putting myself at risk using my debit card? What should I do? Well, Stephanie, let me start by saying thank you for your question. It's a question that I actually get pretty common in my financial consulting practice, and I appreciate you reaching out. The goal today is to balance wise financial stewardship with security. Well, welcome to the Ask Ralph Show, where my goal is to master your finances from a Christian perspective. I'm your host, Ralph Estep Jr., and I am thrilled you joined me, and I appreciate the time that you're investing in my show. My goal is truly to help you achieve financial freedom and grow in your faith. One of the ways you can do that is you can go to askralph.com and join our community. I give away a book out there. You can get it. This book right here. It's called Mastering Your Finances. Now, if you were to buy this book on Amazon, it will cost you $10. But if you go to the website, you join our email list, I'll send it to you absolutely free. The other thing I want to say to you right now is if you're getting value from the show, do me a favor and please share it with your friends. Another thing I'm going to ask you to do is send your questions. My whole goal of the Ask Ralph Show, it's why we call it Ask Ralph, is because I want you to ask me questions. So you can send those questions to my email, that's ralph@askralph.com, or visit our website, that's at askralph.com. You'll see a little microphone icon at the bottom. Click on it and tell me what's on your mind. You know, I always like to get things started with a verse from the Bible to help ground us in our faith. This one comes from the book of Luke, chapter 16, verse 11. And it says this: So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? That's a powerful verse. And it reminds us of the importance of being wise stewards of our financial resources. Part of that includes protecting ourselves from potential risks and fraud. Well, now let's address the elephant in the room. What is your bank not telling you about your debit card? The truth is, that little piece of plastic in your wallet might be putting your entire financial life at risk. Well, let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about a client named John. Now listen, when I talk about clients in the show, I never use the client's real name. So if you hear me say the word John or Sally or Susie, that's because I'm using it. But let's just call this guy John. Now, John was a responsible guy, hardworking, small business owner. This dude paid his bills on time. He never missed a beat. He kept a close eye on his finances, and he used his debit card for every single thing because he didn't want to get into that place of having debt. He wanted to stay on top of spending. And to be honest with you, it was great for us as his accounting firm. It made my life a lot easier because every single transaction was right there on his debit card. So I saw it on his statement. It was easy to take care of his books. Well, let me tell you what happened. So one Monday morning, John calls me in a panic. I mean, he was freaking out. Over the weekend, his bank account had become completely drained. Now, first he tells me, oh, Ralph, I thought I made a mistake. Maybe I didn't realize I had checks outstanding. But when he looked at his transactions, he slowly figured out that it was fraud. When he looked back at it, he finally was able to put two and two together. And he remembered he had bought gas on that Friday. And what ended up happening is they put this skimmer device at a gas station. This is one of the big deals. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. But they put this skimming device and they captured his debit card information. And in 48 hours, listen to this, in 48 hours, they had stolen $15,000. He had absolutely nothing in his account. And think about this. This is his small business. He was crushed. It impacted his small business because he was using this as his business account. He didn't have anything to turn to. Now you might be thinking, but Ralph, surely the bank will cover those fraudulent charges, right? Well, not so fast. It's where things get tricky. This is the thing you need to understand. With a debit card, your protection against fraud is much weaker than using a credit card. And this is key. You got to hear me on this. It is not as simple with a debit card as it is a credit card. So let's talk about what's called the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. There's a PDF that you can access that tells you all about it. Now, this Electronic Fund Transfer Act, it limits your liability for these fraudulent debit card transactions. But here's the key to this whole thing. The protection depends on how quickly you report the fraud. So if you report the fraud within 2 business days, they cap your liability at $50. But if you wait longer, you could be on the hook for $500 or more. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't realize. If you don't notice it for more than 60 days after your statement is sent, you could be liable for all the money taken from your account. It's what they call, you've got to check your statement, and they want you to do it within a reasonable amount of time. So basically, if you haven't looked at your statement for 60 days, they can tell you, hey, too bad. So think about John. John's fraud happened over a weekend. He didn't even notice it until Monday. I mean, maybe he was out doing things on his, with his family and all that kind of stuff. So 2 business days had passed. Well, guess what? Even the best scenario, John lost $500. And that's not to mention the stress and the hassle of dealing with that fraud. And think about this. A lot of people have a lot of things set up for automatic payment. Well, once he had to figure this out, they had to replace his card. He had to go through and set up all of those things again. But here's the real kicker. While John was fighting to get his money back, he couldn't pay his mortgage. He couldn't pay his employees. He couldn't pay his suppliers. His entire life and business were thrown into chaos because of one compromised debit card. Well, let's talk about my other client. Let's call him Mike. Now, Mike, on the other hand, used his credit card for all his purchase. And if there was ever an issue with a suspicious charge, all he had to do is pick up the phone and call his credit card company, and they reversed it immediately. Many of you may have gone through this as well. You see something weird on your statement, or maybe you've got alerts set up and you get this strange charge. You just call the credit card company. You don't lose any money. There's really no stress. And most credit card companies will even overnight you a new card. Now, that said, you still have to go and set up all those auto items again. You're not going to get around that. But here's why Mike's story is so much better than John's. So Mike learned to use his credit card responsibly. He paid off his statement balance each and every month. He never paid interest. And Mike used it for all his business purchases. And guess what? He told me in 1 year, and I saw it on his statements, he had earned $3,000 back in cash rewards just by putting all his business purchases on it. So let's cut to the chase. What are the pros and cons of using a debit card? Let me break it down for you. Here's the pros of using a debit card. And there are some pros. It's linked directly to your checking account, which it's going to help you avoid overspending. Because listen, if you don't have the money, you can't spend it. The other nice thing about debit cards is there's usually no annual fee. It's something that your bank or credit union or other financial institution offers. And probably the biggest thing about it is you can withdraw cash from ATMs without incurring any cash advance fees like you do on a credit card. But here's the dark side. Here's the cons of using a debit card. We've talked about this. You've got limited fraud protection compared to credit cards. With that credit card, the money isn't coming out of your account right away. So you have the ability to call that credit card company and say, yo, wait a minute, dude. I didn't go to, Tahiti and buy this stuff. This isn't me. The other cool thing about, the downside of debit cards is there's potential overdraft fees. If you're not careful with your balance, maybe you're intentional, maybe you're not even getting any fraud on your account, but you overdraft your account because you're not paying attention. Well, I wrote a check, and you didn't realize that was going to come out. So you might get hit with those overdraft fees. Another thing about debit cards, which a lot of people don't consider, is it doesn't help you at all build your credit history, whereas a credit card will do that. Most debit cards don't have any rewards or cashback programs like credit cards, and it holds your account for certain transactions. I don't know if you've ever been through this. I have. I know there was a time in my life when all I had was a debit card. So if I went to rent a car, it held like $500, or I did a hotel stay, it held a couple $100. And here's the other thing you need to understand. When it comes to fraud protection with a debit card, here's what you need to know. This is the bottom line. Number one, your liability depends on how quickly you report the fraud, like we talked about. In John's case, it was over a weekend. It started on Friday, went Saturday and Sunday. So he was liable for that $500 because it took several days for him to figure it out. The other thing you're going to have to do, number two, you might have to fight to get your money back. And in the meantime, your account is empty. Like we talked about with John, he couldn't pay his mortgage. He couldn't pay his employees. He couldn't pay his suppliers. That is a massive issue. And the biggest thing, number three, as it relates to fraud, there is no buffer between fraudsters and your actual bank account. Hey, you're giving them the keys to the vault and saying, come right in. Now listen, I'm going to put an article out in the show notes. It comes from Bankrate, and it talks about where you should never use a debit card. I'm not going to get into it on the show, but you can go check that out. It's a good thing to take a look at. So you might say, Ralph, what should I do? I always like to give you actionable steps, and here they are. Number one, consider using a credit card for most of your purchases. Now, especially those online or at places where your card information could be compromised. One of the big ones is gas station. These skimming devices are no joke. Or restaurants. Think about it. The waitress brings up your bill at the end of the meal, says, oh, Mr. Ralph, how do you want to pay for this? Oh, here's my credit card. Well, what do? They put it in one of those little black fold things and they go off with it. You don't think there's an opportunity for fraud there? If you're at a restaurant. Now, one of the things a lot of restaurants are doing, which I think is really kind of cool, is they're bringing these things, I think it's called Toast, and they actually bring it to the table. So you actually do your credit card, tapping or swiping right there. Number two thing, action item. If you do use your debit card, set up alerts on your bank account for any transactions. That might seem silly, but most banks now, look, they want to prevent fraud too because they don't want to lose any money. They don't mind if you lose a little bit, but they don't want to lose any at all. So set up those account transactions, those alerts. I do the same thing with my credit card. Sometimes I'll say to my wife, hey, did you do such and such? Oh yeah. She's like, why are you asking me? It's because I just got an alert. And here's another thing. We talked about with John's case. You got to check your account regularly. Now, he checked it on Monday. I don't think that's unreasonable to not check it all weekend. But listen, I've got more and more clients and customers who look at their bank account on a daily basis. Just skim through it, see if it makes sense. And here's another big one. Never use your debit card for online purchases or at an unfamiliar ATM machine. A lot of people don't realize this. These ATMs are all over the place. You might find them in little convenience stores and all that kind of stuff, but you don't know, is there a skimming device on there that's going to steal your information? And listen, never, ever, never use your debit card for an online purchase. Another thing I'm going to recommend, and a lot of people don't like when I say this, but it's a twofold thing. And that's keep a small amount in your checking account and transfer money as needed. That's one of the things that I do. Even in my business account, I don't keep a lot of cash in that. I might have a money market account or something like this. So it's twofold. Number one, it's preventing that fraud. And the second thing it's doing, it's helping my money grow. Remember, using a credit card responsibly. Now that means paying off the balance in full each month can provide better protection than that debit card and even give you some financial benefits to rewards like we talked about. Look at what Mike did. He used his credit card responsibly, paid that off every month. He never incurred any interest charges and he got a whopping $3,000 back over the year. So let me wrap things up. Your debit card might seem like a safe, responsible choice, but it could be putting your finances at risk. You got to understand the pros and cons and start taking steps to better protect yourself. You can make smarter decisions about when and how to use your debit card. Well, let me talk about what's going up on tomorrow's show. Tomorrow's our Technology Tuesday show. We're going to talk about VPNs. That's a virtual private network. We're going to talk about how they work and why it's useful. In today's digital age, protecting your online information, just as we talked about today, is just as important as protecting your physical wallet, so you don't want to miss it. Now, before I close out, I want to say this. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all this financial information, don't worry. I'm here to help you. I can help coach you. If you've got issues going on with your personal financial situation, or how about your business situation, you're looking for ways to grow your personal finances, or maybe you need to recover from difficult times you've been through. If you're looking for ways to grow your business, this is what I do. This is my expert mission field. I'm going to encourage you to schedule a consultation with me. I charge $150. You can do that right at askralphpodcast.com/store and let me create a personalized plan to help you manage your finances safely, grow your business, whatever that looks like for you. Remember, my passion is to help you achieve financial success. I want you to live out your dreams, and I want you to do that by growing in your faith. The truth is, together we can master your finances from a Christian perspective. So as I always say, I want you to stay financially savvy, and may God bless you abundantly.
Thank you for joining us on the Ask Ralph podcast. And with a simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back to our next episode. And remember, financial issues don't have to be complicated. Just ask Ralph. The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Saggio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media, Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.